This podcast is supported by Wesleyan Financial Services, providers of specialist financial advice to members of the legal profession. Wesleyan's team of dedicated experts have been helping law firms and their employees achieve financial well-being over many years, providing personal and commercial financial advice, in-firm seminars and online guidance. Strategic partners with the Law Society, Wesleyan is proud of its partnership with Women in the Law UK. For more information about Wesleyan, visit wesleyan.co.uk, or to arrange a financial education event in your firm or a no-obligation financial health check, connect with Sarah Deacon, Wesleyan Area Manager, on LinkedIn.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Talking Law from Women in the Law UK. I'm Sally Penni, a barrister based in Manchester at Kenworthy's Chambers and a joint vice chair of the Association of Women Barristers. I'm also the founder of Women in the Law UK, an organisation which is passionate about supporting the next leaders in law. We put on regular events, host masterclasses and also enjoy an annual dinner and conference. Do come and learn more about what we do at womeninthelawuk.com. You could also connect with us on social media. We'd love to hear from you. Find us on Twitter at Women in the Law UK. On this episode, I'm thrilled to talk to Brie Stevens-Hoare QC. Brie is a highly experienced property barrister dealing with all aspects of property litigation, and she recently won Barrister of the Year at the Modern Law Awards and Chambers Real Estate Silk of the Year Award. I asked Brie when she first became interested in the law.
Age 13, combination of watching Crown Court and Rumpole on the telly, having one of only two so far in my life personality clashes, in that case with a biology teacher, which meant I couldn't be the vet I thought I might be. And I hit on wanting to be a barrister. So that was it. Little did I know that by pure luck, I'd hit on the right thing for me because I really knew nothing about the law, had no connections with it, knew no one in it.
Wow. So how did you then start and go about it? You obviously went to university. Did people go to university in your family?
No, I was the first in my family to go to university, but somehow I always knew I was going to go to university. I was going to leave home. I was going to go to university. I think both my parents instilled in me a sense that life was out there, grab it by the throat, go get it, make what you want of it. It was very much an ethos. In terms of role models, I mean, different things. We all, if we're honest, I think have role models within our families. So my grandfather, who was a very straightforward man, army, then postie, he taught me the most sort of positive approach to life. Whatever's going on, there's always something good, something you can take out of anything, and forward you go. And then I was very involved in the women's movement as a teenager. So there were a lot of very strong women around me who were doing amazing things and making a difference. My mum and some of her friends set up the first women's refuge in Reading, which was one of the very early ones. We got very involved in Reclaim the Night, all sorts of stuff. So I saw a lot of strong women who wanted to change the world around me. And
Would you class yourself as a feminist?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have, through the decades, it's been a dirty word.
Yes.
I recall being asked in a pupillage interview in the 80s whether I was a feminist, because when at the LSE I'd done a course, Women in the Law. They looked at that on my CV and said, you've done this. Does that mean you're a feminist? And my response, probably a bit too smart, but there we go, was, you just tell me what you mean by that term, and I'll tell you if I fit that description. Yes, I've always self-identified as a feminist.
Absolutely. And I'll come back to the feminist and the dirty word later on, if I may. But I wanted to ask you about your area of law and why you went, or why you practice in that area.
Well, when I set off age 13, it was all about truth and justice, and I thought I would be a criminal practitioner. In the early 80s, most sets, not all, but most sets were general common law sets. So I did pupillage in a set that did everything, but thinking I wanted to do crime, and most of the advocacy I got to do was crime. And I did a third six and a fourth six, but that's another story. But there came a point, in fact, when I moved to a purely criminal set, that I realised it wasn't for me. I was loving it, but I
Yes.
was loving the fact I was getting to do the advocacy. I realised that actually it wasn't for me long term. At that point, there was very little paperwork in crime. And if, things were not effective when you got to court, then you were kicking your heels all day until 4 o'clock when you went to the clerk's room to see if there was something for the next day. And I
Yeah.
wanted to have stuff to do all day. And I wanted a different balance of the sort of oral advocacy, the written work, the mental jigsaw puzzles of pleadings. So because I'd done everything in pupillage, although most of the advocacy was crime, I sort of looked back and thought, what have you enjoyed the most? And bizarrely, it was property, which I'd hated at university. But I think it matters to people. It's people's homes, their heritage, their business. So it's not just money. I find the law in it really interesting because you've got culturally lots of different types of law that intersect with each other. And I thought, okay, fair enough. I'll try and be successful at this.
And you can obviously always remember all those millions of case law and cases. I seem to remember at university, those cases endlessly, interesting, but just how do you remember them all? And for you, I guess it's a way and it's a good area for you to kind of shape the law and the future of the law, some of the senior cases you've been doing.
I did a leadership program, which I found very, very useful in terms of looking back over my career and how I got to where I was and where I want to be. And thinking back to those women when I was a teenager and involved in the women's movement, and when I talked about becoming a barrister, sort of half of them said, fantastic, brilliant, get on the inside and change it. And the other half were like, traitor, you can't do that, you'll become part of the establishment. And I think what I sort of realized on some levels was that actually what was important to me was fine, come the day of the revolution, I'm there. But in the
Mm.
meantime, I will try and get into the inside and change things, staying authentic to myself, but change things. That actually what was important, therefore, was to be as successful as I could be. And there was something quite appealing when I realized, one, I was more drawn to property, two, that it was one of those areas of law that you were getting all the signals. If you're going to be a woman at the bar, which you shouldn't be anyway, you certainly shouldn't be doing this. It was very clear where if women were at the bar, what they were expected to do, and there was an awful lot they were expected not to do. Funnily enough, the things that earned more money.
Yes. And it's great to see. I wanted to digress for a moment, if I may. Then last year you were Barrister of the Year at the Modern Law Awards with over, I think, 800 people, held in Manchester for the first time, usually in London.
There were dodgem cars inside.
There were, which threw us all a bit. But everyone was sort of, dressed up to the nines and so on and so forth. And then you won the award and went up, and you were looking really nice, but you were just kind of like, well, my intellectual ability speaks for itself. And I was like, I need to get to know that woman. And I just wondered, if is that your persona? Is that how you've carried yourself across the bar? Really, just sort of get on with it, and this is who you are.
When I started out at the bar, I had a car and it was a pink Beetle. That's what I drove around with. I've spent a lot of time being told you shouldn't be that or you should be like this, and I, I can't claim I've never bent and adjusted to it, but every time I've regretted it.
Mm.
So yeah, it's a very powerful thing in me, the need to be authentically me and seen by the world for who I am. Either don't see me at all or see me as I am.
Yes. Well, I wonder if I can ask you, I'm obviously a black woman, setting up an organization focusing, I guess, on gender, but also on race. And I wanted to ask you about diversity in our profession, in the legal profession, but also and your views on it. Could we do better, and do we need to try and have more intersectionality?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's not peculiar to the bar. And I think there is managing inclusion so that you give the safe spaces to particular strands of diversity that need those safe spaces, but
Yes.
at the same time, recognize that we don't actually sit separately in those strands. You and I are both women. That
Yes.
has certain impacts on our lives. You're a
Yeah.
woman of color. I'm a pansexual woman, or living as a lesbian for the last few decades. So that means we have different experiences and different challenges, but we do share being a woman and perhaps share being other and outside. With that, quite often comes, not necessarily, but quite often comes an ability to stand in others' shoes and to start to at least understand how impactful being a sort of other is, even if you don't understand exactly what being that particular other is. So for me, the work in that space is about doing the two things, which in a sense are intention, but I think you just have to treat them as two different elements and two different ways of working. The safe space, strengthening any particular group that needs that, and allowing them to flourish and grow and work out how they need the particular profession culture to actually change and open up for them.
Yeah.
But also then to come together and work across all of those with allies, with
Yeah.
people who come from what I, with affection, call the WHAM group. White, heterosexual, able-bodied males. I think it's much friendlier than a lot of the names they often get called. But they're invaluable as allies. So actually, once we all start to work in an intersectional way across the piece, bringing our understanding of what we don't understand about each other, then I think we start to make real change.
Absolutely. And can I just ask you, you were open about your own sexuality and how you identify. Have you always been comfortable being like that? Or did you're very authentic? Did you make that decision? Because there are some studies that actually, people entering the bar and the profession open at university, but the moment
Go
they
back
enter,
into the closet. Yeah.
yeah, they go back into closet, which concerns me. So I just wondered what you thought about that, particularly being open and sharing it.
Yeah. Well, for me, all my relationships up until I was about 30 were with men, and since they've all been with women. Seen the light now. Wanting different things at different stages of my life and wanting relationships that operated in different ways. And what
Yeah,
I brought to them is what made the change. So for me, that change happened at the bar. I perceived myself and everyone perceived me as being straight. And then I was in a relationship with a woman, not only with a woman, but with a woman I was in chambers with. So
yeah,
actually, that experience, and she has in the past said it's okay for me to talk about it, informed quite a lot of what goes to your question, or the answer to your question, which I think is two things. First of all, her family were homophobic.
yeah,
My parents had always had gay friends. So for me, it was a voyage of discovery about myself. But my
yes,
assumption was and always is that on a human level, until there is some evidence to tell me otherwise, I assume people will be fine. So it might be because of a particular culture or a particular religion that think, oh, well, they may not be fine. I need to go a little
yes,
cautiously, but my starting point is people are fine. Whereas her starting point was it's the end, everyone will disown us, it's the end of our careers. So I think your sort of base, your family, your parents' position does inform what you expect from the rest of the world. The other thing is an intergenerational thing. I did some mentoring for a fabulous charity called Just Like Us, who were giving back to their ambassadors, who were students who go into schools.
Yeah.
And they wanted, as those students were leaving university and going into their professional, corporate lives, whatever, to give them senior mentors. And that really opened my eyes to the fact that when you do that transition from university to a profession, for the first time in your life, you leave being in institutions that are not controlled by your generation, but predominated and about your generation. And you go
Yes.
into organisations that have often a long standing culture, which has been created by different generations, possibly by generations that are no longer there, and large numbers of people who've come through and been assimilated to that. So you suddenly hit your head on a very different sort of institution or culture. And I think that is why a lot of people, when they leave university, go back into the closet, because suddenly they realize these are very, very different places and cultures that are determined by a very different perspective of the world,
Yes.
and that they don't have power in it. And it's not for them, it's not about them. They're entering something that pre-exists, if that makes sense.
Yes. No. It does. Can I ask you then, how do you think we could improve and do better and how can our male colleagues and the WAMs, help?
Listening, to start with. I think we can all be allies for each other. So, I should listen and understand people who have a strand of diversity or multiple strands of diversity that aren't my experience, and be led by them informing me what they need to have a culture open up, to have it being inclusive of them and valuing them and not presenting more barriers to them. But also being conscious of when you're the person in the room who can actually say, so as a white person, and I'm the person in the room, could say to another white person, whoa, hang on, or male that can say to another male, because actually sometimes that gets through far more effectively than when the person on the wrong end of it says, hang on a minute.
Yes.
Um, so listening, taking responsibility and care for each other across all of that. I long for the time we don't even have to have the labels and don't have to think about it, and we don't need the safe spaces. But we're a
Yes.
long way from that as yet.
Well, just talking of safe spaces then, how did you get involved with Joe
They were hunting.
Delaney? Yes,
And
her
you,
campaign. Yes.
Jo is an amazing woman. She's a family practitioner herself. It turns out we were both called in 1986, although we didn't know each other at bar school. Currently professor of law at Gresham College, and has used that platform in her last year as professor to really sort of talk about the bar, well-being and inclusion. And she did a call out on Twitter for people with experience of sexual harassment at the bar to contact her with their stories and promise confidentiality. So I direct messaged her and said, happy to have a chat. And we spoke one Sunday afternoon. And the similarity in our stories were gobsmacking. So she asked me, I told her my story, of being in pupillage, taken away out of London for a case, and there being a problem with hotel rooms. In my case, adjoining rooms with a door unlocked and a person a male presenting themselves, senior male who was hugely influential as to my future.
Yeah.
Hers was arriving at a reception desk and discovering that a double room had been booked. Yeah, so we sort of talked about, once I'd told her my story and some of the other not so glorious bits,
Yes.
we talked it through. She told me hers. And we sort of decided, well, if we can't be open, if at our stage with our profiles and our status at the bar, if we can't be open about what's going on, then that's a pretty poor show. We're actually, I think it's fair to say, both felt that we'd sort of allowed ourselves to assume things had got a lot better.
Mm.
I do think things have improved a bit.
Yes.
I think there is a recognition now, which there wasn't in the 80s, that actually it's completely out of order. Whereas in the 80s, you always felt, certainly with all the sort of comments and put downs and patronising and outright sexual sort of banter in inverted commas,
Yeah.
you know, if that you really had to tough it out, and if you said anything, you would either be told you had no sense of humour or you weren't tough enough to make it at the bar. I think there's far fewer people who would say that now, but nevertheless the behaviours still continue. So I think we both felt a huge sense of responsibility for having taken our eye off the ball and not realised that
Yeah.
we were no longer the target. It wasn't that it had got that much better. And so came to the conclusion we actually had to be willing to use our names in the stories. So I told her that she could use me in her lecture, and she used me in subsequent press articles and stuff, as you know, along with her having some full-on abuse of power, pupillage, sexual harassment stories. And you know, I think it's important that we acknowledge that is historically the case at the bar, and it's still going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, can I ask you, with all that you do, and you do a lot for the profession, not just in silk, but outside of it. You've talked about mentoring before, you do lots of hard work. What do you do for well-being? Because the burnout rate and stress and nervous breakdowns are high at the bar. We're self-employed, and for solicitors, and paralegals and so on. What do you do to kind of keep a work-life balance, if you like?
Well, I'm not going to claim that I have a balance, because my partner Paula would scream if she heard me ever claiming that I had that. But what I do is a bit of being conscious about what nourishes me, seeing myself as a bank account that's always running on overdraft in terms of what I put out, work and
Yeah.
others, and making sure I give myself some of the what nourishes me. So I know I need in any 7 days to have a 24-hour period where I don't work, even if that
Yes.
means the other days are longer. For me, that's a pattern that is sustainable, and when I don't do it, I notice the difference. A bit of adrenaline rush is always a good thing, roller coasters and stuff. And my guilty secret is soap operas.
What? Have you got a favorite one?
Oh, I love them all. I love them all.
There is something about downtime, though, isn't there? I remember a very
Yeah.
good friend of mine, Jenny, when she did her kitchen, got a television in it. It was the first flat she ever bought, and the television would come down just above the cooker so that she could always watch Coronation Street.
Perfect.
Uh, yes, and I think there is something about a long day in court. I don't get the chance now because of children, but a long day in court, pre-kids or whatever, and then just switching off and watching the soap opera. I mean, The Archers is probably as good as I get.
I don't know how you do it with kids. I have to
Yeah.
say, I absolutely hats off, full on respect for any barrister who has kids, because it's an amazing, fabulous career. I love it. I absolutely love it. But I just don't know how you do it with kids. But
Yeah.
amazing people do, like you. Lots of
Well,
amazing, successful women do, and guys, but more the women.
yes, quite. Thank you, thank you. Keep going, keep going. Despite having all these skeleton arguments to draft and homeschooling in COVID, that's a
Oh,
new challenge, isn't it?
yes, that is. That is. I've spoken to some of my colleagues in chambers, and yeah. So we're now all chambers meetings and all the rest of it. Kids, pets, all welcome. Don't worry about it.
Yes. Well, interesting. Just thinking about that. Do you think it will affect the way that we work and the way that we think about things, our approach?
Yes. On the criminal bar side, you guys, as I understand it, have been working with technology in a way that on the civil side we really haven't been.
Yes.
Yeah, a few telephone hearings, yes, but that was pretty well it. And I have to say, my experience of videos in civil courts has been, oh, there is one in a cupboard somewhere and it somehow never works when it gets brought out. I think this will, we as a profession, will be far more, if I can use the word, articulate with the technology and
Yes.
able to actually advocate with it and through it. And so we won't, undoubtedly the professions have been resistant to that change. Oh, it can't quite work, and suddenly, it will, and we'll make it work. Juries obviously is a completely different aspect.
Yes.
So I think the profession will be more skilled, is already remarkably skilling up. And by the time we emerge from this properly, because I do think it's going to go on quite a bit longer, the court system will have had to. They clearly really are determined to keep the justice show on the road, which is the
Yeah.
right thing. And so it's going to have to deal with technology, remote use of hearings, etc.
Yes. Now, do you have a favorite fictional lawyer? I know you mentioned there's Rumpole, so it may be there is Rumpole, and then books. Do you have a favorite book or books that have really impacted your life whilst you're thinking about it?
Favorite lawyer? Well, I'm going to say Miranda from Sex and the City.
Oh gosh, yes, not had that before. Yes, Miranda.
Punchy, redhead, the voice of reason, good
Yeah,
mates, goes out and has a proper good laugh with, and restore her, nourish her.
yeah.
So yeah, I think probably her. Who knows if she was good as a lawyer, but she seemed to be successful.
Yeah, she did. Now, she ended up? Did she marry the guy?
Really
This
lovely guy.
Yes, with the glasses, and he was a
Yeah,
restaurateur, so very different to sort of her
yeah.
corporate.
So it sort of
Um,
works me with Paula the artist. So
yeah, yeah.
mostly I don't like legal dramas. I mean, I watched them
Me
a
neither.
lot before I became a lawyer, but they drive us mad. But I have to admit that the one that should have driven me mad but didn't was Silk. Anything
Yeah,
Maxine Peake is in, I think, is amazing. And
yeah.
I would sit there and say that's completely unethical and all the rest of it. But I was a bit nostalgic with that as well, actually. People would say to me, is that real? And I thought it's about 20, 25 years out of date, but yeah. Book. I think the book that probably changed my life most, it's very dated now, is The Woman's Room, which was Marilyn French's first book I think it was about 1977. So I was about 13, 14 when I read it.
That's the year I was born.
Oh, thank you for that.
I was making a note to read it, and I thought, oh,
Do you know, I think it was a key part of my sort of sense of how important personal authenticity was. There's a section in the book where the main character Maya, is pregnant and she sits in a toilet cubicle. We've all done that, haven't we?
oh yeah.
Uh, weeping
Mm,
because she feels that she's been invaded by this pregnancy, and a lot of her feelings around, she didn't want to be pregnant, it was an accident, but also that everyone is treating her as a pregnancy rather than even a woman, and certainly not as Maya.
yeah,
People think they can come up and tap her belly, and you know and I think it was the first time, and it's a very well written section in the book, first time I sort of really understood that pain and agony of the world treating you as something you're not respecting you for the person you are, not seeing, being seen, that whole sort of piece. which for me
Yeah.
also, for instance, if you look at trans issues, it's the thing that comes up there, and I feel very strongly about that sort of, you determine who you are,
Yeah.
not for the world to decide that and impose it on you. And I think that runs quite sort of deep as a theme for me in a lot of my inclusion type work and interest. Yeah, that I think that's the earliest time I can think of really starting to understand that.
Yeah, interesting. And so, Brie, can I ask you then, just from that, what sort of three tips or advice and guidance would you have perhaps for those entering into the legal profession at present, whether from the LGBT community or not? And perhaps those who are in the job now, we've got issues with retention, we've got other
Mm,
issues still going up. We love the job we do. I love being an advocate, as do you. But are there any kind of, I don't know if motivational, I hate that term, motivational speakers, but are there any kind of inspirational tips maybe for future
Um,
lawyers or future entrants and those who are in it?
you and anyone listening will be absolutely gobsmacked to hear me say be yourself.
Mm.
But the sort of add on to that, be yourself and don't leave your personality at the door. I particularly say that to people who are looking for pupillage. Yourself is the person you're best at being. Trying to be something that you are not, because that's what you think the group of people you're trying to impress want. One, you may be wrong about what they want.
Mm.
Two, being someone other than yourself is not sustainable.
Yeah.
Three, you're not going to be as good at it as you are at being yourself. And I'm sure you, like me, have sat in lots of pupillage interviews where people have left their personality at the door. And it's the interviews where people engage and you see their personality that you actually really think, yeah, there's something about this person, and I can see how lay and professional clients will be happy to work with this person.
Yes.
So that's number one. I think know yourself and be kind to yourself. Understand what for you need to keep your show on the road. And for some people that's holidays, and for other people it's music. It can be anything, but the things that nourish you, that actually enable you to keep going, because it is a hard profession.
Yeah.
Um, I think we all have to try and run not at 100% because we know we'll be forced up to 110 and 120% periodically,
Yeah.
and not to be 100% plus all the time. But it's really important to understand how your body and your mind work when they've had enough and what you need to give them, whatever that is for you personally. And I'm going to nick from, I don't know if you know Nicola Davis, amazing woman. She's the ombudsman of all things military, as far as I can work out. She says you need a board, not one person. So you need a sponsor, a mentor, a connector, and a friend. Sponsor, someone who's in the important places, who's a senior person who knows you and will sort of reference you and sort of give you those tips. A mentor who mentors you, we all know that. A connector, someone who has a network and will take you with them and introduce you to their network. And then a
Yes.
friend, the person you can go to when it's all gone wrong, or you think it's all gone wrong, or it's plateaued, or you don't understand what's happening, or just it's all too much. It's an excellent summary, but it's not mine.
Well, it's yours now because we'll quote you on it. It's amazing advice. I feel so privileged to be able to interview you and for you to take out your time. But just before we finish, I wanted to ask you really, what's next? Could the bench be the next stop? Might we see you either there or in the Court of Appeal or in the High Court?
Definitely not in the near future, because one of my roles at the moment is I'm the Barrister Commissioner on the JAC, which feels to me like somewhere where I can be actually having more impact and working in terms of inclusion and improving the balance of our judiciary and trying to drive it towards a stage where it properly represents the society that it judges, because to me that's really important. So at the moment, that's a position that I have, that I'm really enjoying working with, and I think is really important. I think I can have more use and more impact.
A huge thank you to Brie Stevens-Hoare QC for taking part in Talking Law. Thank you again for listening to Talking Law with me, Sally Penni. Do connect with me on Twitter @SallyPenny1. We'd love it if more people heard our podcast, so if you could spare just a couple of minutes to leave us a review, that will help people find us. Until the next episode, do check out the latest Women in the Law UK book. It's a look at how far the profession has come in the last 100 years, featuring career and well-being advice from women and men. It's available now on Amazon. Just search for Talking Law by Sally Penni. And don't forget to visit us at womeninthelawuk.com for all the latest news about our organisation. We look forward to connecting with you. Talking Law was produced by Sam Walker and is a What Goes On media production. Bye for now.